It was November 18th, 1929. 34-year-old DeCasto Earl Meyer was strapped to a lie detector as investigators questioned him about the murder of James Eugene Bassett. After 5 straight days of 8-hour interrogations, Meyer finally broke. "I know what that machine is. I know it's recording the truth. I can't beat it." Meyer's anxiety over the machine eventually led him to give up the location of the body. So the lie detector worked, but not in the way it was supposed to. Only the stress associated with the machine forced Meyer to finally give in, and that's exactly the problem with lie detectors. The science behind them has been increasingly scrutinized since their inception, but they're still being used in high-stakes scenarios with real consequences. So if lie detectors don't actually work, why do we still use them? If you at home, if you want to see more content like this one, go and hit that subscribe button to stay up to date on all of our weekly content. Now on to the rest of the video. In the early 1900s, scientists theorized that there was a connection between lying and high blood pressure. Dr. William Moulton Marston used blood pressure to examine German prisoners of war. He also created Wonder Woman, but that's a story for another day. In the summer of 1921, Berkeley psychologist John Larson used a new machine to question a suspected priest murderer in San Francisco. His device monitored not just blood pressure, but also respiration and pulse. Newspaper headlines pronounced William Hightower guilty by impartial science, and the device was renamed the lie detector, a name Larson would later come to call Frankenstein's monster. The third variation, introduced by Leonard Keeler, added sensors to measure sweat. He called it the polygraph and became the first American to patent this machine. Despite inconsistent results and doubt from the scientific community, the US government quickly became the world's largest polygraph user.
The polygraph, or so-called lie detector, is a valuable aid in the interrogation of suspected offenders.
During the Red Scare of the 1950s, thousands of federal employees were subjected to polygraphs to weed out communists. By the 1980s, 10,000 trained polygraph examiners were conducting 2 million tests per year.
28 states in America accept the results of polygraph tests as legal evidence, and the polygraph is now used as a matter of course by the FBI and other government agencies.
Today's polygraph is digital, but essentially measures the same physiological changes. If you're strapped into one today, you would go through a control question test. The examiner would ask you 2 types of questions. Relevant questions ask specifically about the incident in question. Control questions are usually broad in scope, but neither time nor technology has made the polygraph any more reliable. The polygraph works on 2 rather dubious assumptions: that there is any sort of physiological response when a person lies, and that all people emit the same response. Think of it this way: an honest person can be nervous when answering truthfully, and a dishonest person can be perfectly fine. In 2016, researchers found that as a person lies more and more, the brain becomes desensitized. That person becomes less and less likely to show a psychophysiological response. Professional criminals can easily learn to slow their heart rates and breathing while lying. Now, on the other hand, honest people may become so terrified while taking a polygraph test that test results may incorrectly indicate deception.
Did we eat pot roast for dinner tonight?
Yes.
Was it undercooked?
No, it was rare. It was a little rare for my taste. But I
I'm
would.
just kidding. I'm just.
In 1987, authorities used a polygraph to question Gary Ridgway, the suspected murderer of dozens of Seattle women. But Ridgway, unperturbed by the test, passed. So investigators primarily focused on an innocent man until Ridgway confessed 16 years later. According to late psychologist Leonard Sachs, the basic idea that we can accurately detect a person's veracity is more myth than reality. Congress ultimately made it illegal in 1983 for private employers to give polygraph tests to potential employees. In 1988, the Employee Polygraph Protection Act restricted polygraph use to positions that handled drugs or security.
We now have some good evidence to show that the polygraph is inaccurate. It's wrong about a third of the time on the average, and what's worse, nearly 50% of innocent people are likely to fail polygraph tests, even though they are truthful.
But even so, they're still being used regularly. The FBI gives tests to every person who is considered for a job there. In some places, officials use the device to monitor sex offenders on probation.
When men are on the polygraph, they tend to disclose information even before they get hooked up to the machine. What the polygraph then does is clarify whether or not they've disclosed everything they have to say. I think probably lie detector, for example, is probably a misnomer, and it's better to think of it as a truth facilitator.
And 18 states still allow polygraph testimony in certain circumstances. Take California, for example. The polygraph test can be used as long as it's an employee who's requested one, not the employer. The polygraph's greatest weapon is people's belief that it works. In some cases, people who believe that it can accurately detect deception are more likely to tell the truth. Some see the polygraph as a useful deterrent. If someone believes that they are going to be regularly subjected to these tests, they're less likely to commit a crime that leads to prison. For both of these beliefs, it doesn't really matter whether the test actually can detect lies, just that it's perceived to do so. But even these assumptions can be a bit far-fetched. So results from polygraphs can only be used as evidence if both parties approve. Because of its lack of scientific accuracy, the polygraph continues to evolve. In 1988, the computer voice stress analyzer was born and is still used today. The key difference between this machine and the traditional polygraph involves a person's voice. The former focuses solely on changes in voice frequency as muscles involuntarily tighten from stress, which theoretically can't be consciously controlled. Now, scientists still have doubts about any machine that claims it can detect lies, but the CVSA has proven to produce higher accuracy rates than the polygraph. According to a recent study, in 96.4% of interviews conducted where the CVSA indicated stress, subjects made self-incriminating confessions that turned out to be true. No one iteration of the polygraph has ever delivered 100% accurate results, and it may never. But it's still a thing, and until someone invents the next best thing, it just might continue to be a thing.